Mr. John, an elderly man, wearing old clothes and worn plastic sandals, walked slowly into the bank. When he arrived at the transaction counter, he gave his ATM card and asked to withdraw a large sum of money. However, when the bank clerk looked at the card and asked him to show his identity card, he was confused because he could not find his ID. Although he hurriedly rummaged through his pocket, there was no result, making him even more confused and embarrassed. The bank employee showed impatience and asked him to leave to bring his full papers. The people around him began to pay attention and whisper. Their eyes were contemptuous, thinking that he could not afford to complete the procedure or even did not have a large amount of money, as he said. The feeling of loneliness and judgment made Mr. John even more confused, not knowing what to do. In desperation, John took out his mobile phone to call his son. But when he turned it on, he realized that the phone had run out of battery without his knowledge. The feeling of helplessness and confusion rose even more in his heart. He looked around, hoping that someone would help him, but the customers in the bank were all engrossed in their work. No one bothered to notice his presence. Back at the counter, he noticed that the bankers didn't care about him either, and he felt more abandoned than ever. Not giving up, John tried to borrow a phone from a woman standing near the counter. When he asked softly, she just shook her head and said, "Sorry, I'm busy," without looking back at him. Her answer was cold and lacking in goodwill that made him feel like an invisible person. Feelings of shame and shame enveloped him. He did not dare to ask for more from anyone else, but the feeling of being lost and alienated was even more pronounced. He continued to walk, step by step, slow, tired, as if time never passed. He felt like a ghost, a person who had no value in the eyes of those around him. Even though he was standing in the middle of a crowded space, he felt strangely lonely. No one notices his presence. They go about their work without realizing that an old and frail man is lost in it. In that moment, he couldn't help but feel like a burden, a superfluous person who had no value in the eyes of society. By the time it felt like all the doors were closed, a flash of hope suddenly appeared. A young girl, dressed in a plain white shirt and old jeans, walks into the bank. This girl is completely different from the people around her. While everyone is in a hurry and focused on her work, she seems to be gentle and slow. As soon as she walked through the door, her eyes accidentally met Mr. John, who was standing lost in the crowd. She looked at him for a long time, seemingly realizing something in his confusion and embarrassment. Unlike the others, she didn't look at him with cold or distant eyes. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, walking closer to him gently. "Grandpa, are you okay?" she asked in a gentle, caring voice. Her words were like a warm ray of sunshine shining on the soul of Mr. John, who was now filled with feelings of shame and despair. He raised his head, surprised and confused, not understanding why the girl cared about him. But her kind gaze made him feel a little comforted. I can't withdraw money. I forgot to bring my ID," he said, his voice choking. The girl didn't laugh or show any annoyance, but just nodded gently and said, "It's okay. You wait a minute. I have a phone. Let me help you call your family." She didn't seem to be in a hurry, although she certainly had her own affairs. Her patient and kind attitude touched Mr. John. John felt like a burden seemed to be eased when the girl handed him his phone. "I'm not in a hurry. I'm happy as long as I can help you," she said, her eyes gentle and sincere. He thanked her, his voice choked with emotion. This girl, though she did not know him, gave him unconditional help in his most difficult time. A sense of gratitude surged in him, making him feel that, although the world may be cold, there are still kind people who are willing to help others. When the girl handed him the phone, John was somewhat relieved. With trembling hands, he dialed his son's phone number. But this time, the phone rang again with no signal. A new worry rose in his heart. "Where is my son?" he thought, while continuing to listen to the phone ringing hopelessly. The moments passed like a nightmare. The tension and fatigue made him feel more desperate than ever. But just as the anxiety began to weigh down, the girl spoke up again, gently reassuring him. "Don't worry about me. Let me call you back," she said, her voice warm and determined. She was not in a hurry, although she probably had other busy jobs. She picked up the phone again, dialed his son's number proficiently, and within seconds, she was on the call. "Hello, is it Mr. Alex? This is Emily. I'm in the bank with your dad," she said clearly and decisively. She listened for a moment and then continued, "Brother Alex is on his way. Don't worry, everything will be fine." After finishing the call, she turned to look at Mr. John, her face light, her eyes full of comfort. John looked at her, his heart full of emotion. Words of thanks choked in his throat. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was respected and cared for. The feeling of anxiety and loneliness gradually dissipates, replaced by a little hope, although everything is still not complete. "Thank you," he said, his voice choked up, his eyes sparkling with emotion. The girl just smiled, didn't say anything more, but in those eyes he saw sincerity and kindness. The customers around him continued his work, but for him, at this time, the world was left with this girl with warm kindness, helping him in difficult times without any calculation. The feeling of gratitude in him deepened, as if a small ray of light had just flickered in the darkness. About 15 minutes later, a tall man in a black suit walked into the bank, with a strong and confident gait. Mr. Alex, Mr. John's son, took a look around and headed straight to the counter. All eyes in the bank fell on him, and a few people immediately recognized who he was. Alex, the president of a large corporation, they whispered to each other. The eyes of the people around him at this moment suddenly became strange, as if they had just realized something. Alex walked to the counter. His voice was warm but authoritative. "Hello, I'm Alex. What happened to my father?" His question rang out decisively, without the slightest hesitation. The bank employee, who had previously shown impatience with Mr. John, now immediately turned pale, stammering and explaining. "Yes, Mr. John wants to withdraw a large amount of money but does not have enough identification documents. We can't be solved." Alex wasted no time with lengthy explanations. He looked directly at the banker, and his voice was firm. "My father doesn't have an ID in his hand, but that doesn't mean he doesn't deserve respect. He is a longtime customer of this bank, very familiar with Mr. Keem, the general director of the bank. He is not poor, and what he does is not for himself, but for the community." Alex's words were a powerful statement, revealing a secret that very few people knew about John. Alex continued in a decisive tone. "All the money my father wants to withdraw today will be used to help the needy, the poor and sick who are sometimes forgotten by society." Everyone around was stunned when they heard these words. In stark contrast to the image of a poor old man they had imagined, John was actually a man of great wealth, and what he did came from a big heart, for the good of the community. Alex not only clarified his father's position but also affirmed that wealth lies not only in money but also in compassion. "Not only am I rich in money, but I'm also very compassionate," Alex said, his eyes looking around the room, observing the change in people's attitudes. "What my father did was for the poor and sick, not for personal gain." When Alex finished speaking, the whole room suddenly became quiet, and the tense atmosphere before disappeared. The people around him began to realize that they were in too much of a hurry to judge someone they didn't understand. The banker, who had previously been impatient with John, now bowed his head and apologized. "We're sorry, we don't understand. We didn't know he was such a person." The employee's voice trembled, clearly revealing embarrassment and embarrassment. Previous customers are also starting to change their attitudes. A man who had once suspected John now bowed his head, his eyes full of regret. "I'm sorry, we didn't know you had done so many good deeds," the man said in a low voice, but enough to calm the space. Everyone was ashamed of having misjudged John by his appearance. Mr. John stood there, unable to help but feel the change in people's attitudes. The eyes are no longer suspicious or alienated, but respect and admiration. His initial feeling of childishness and embarrassment seemed to dissipate, replaced by relief and peace of mind. He looked at the young student who had helped him from beginning to end, and saw in her eyes sympathy and kindness. She still stood quietly, smiling softly at him. Her gaze made him feel at peace, as if everything would be fine. Finally, when the procedure was completed, Mr. John and Mr. Alex walked out of the bank. He turned to look at his son, his eyes full of emotion. "Thank you and that girl," he said, his voice choking. "Without her help, things probably wouldn't have been so easy today." Brother Alex patted him on the shoulder gently, and his eyes were also full of gratitude. "Rest assured, I understand." When the father and son left, the girl still stood still in the bank, looking at their figures, her smile still gentle and compassionate. She had done something great in a small moment. After John and Alex left the bank, the atmosphere in the room began to calm down. Customers who had previously pointed and judged John now felt a sense of strangeness, as if they had just seen a different picture of life they had never known. Apologies from bank employees and those around them are not only an admission of a mistake but also a sign of awakening in the way they see and evaluate others. The whole bank is now filled with silence, each person reflecting on himself, clearly feeling the change in his attitude. The clerk, who had been impatient with Mr. John, stood still for a long time, her eyes looking at the door, as if she was still feeling the change in the atmosphere. She thought silently about what had just happened, about what Alex had said. The feeling of shame and regret made it impossible for her to forget the look in John's eyes as he left the bank, his eyes full of appreciation, though he said nothing. She felt that she was in too much of a hurry to judge people just by their appearance. These thoughts made her realize that, sometimes in life, it's all too easy to conclude that someone is just based on what we see on the outside without understanding their true story. The student girl, after helping Mr. John, continued to stand there for a while, silently watching the father and son disappear outside the bank door. Her smile remained the same on her face, but in her heart, a warm feeling was spreading. She knew that, although what she did might be small, it meant a lot to others. In a short moment, she did a good thing, helped a person in need. And that's what she thinks is the most important thing in life. Helping others without thinking, not expecting anything in return. In the meantime, bank customers may have also learned the lesson of patience and respect for others, not only from the rich or powerful, but also from people they may have once looked down upon. Indeed, it was John's smallness, his humility and compassion, that changed the way people looked at the world around them. This story not only teaches them about not judging others by their appearance, but also reminds them of the true value of kindness and caring. And for the student, that day was a special day, when she not only helped a person but also helped herself to be more aware of the value of kindness, the connection between people. She created a meaningful moment in this somewhat cold world, a moment where good values are truly celebrated. When Mr. and Mrs. John left the bank, the atmosphere in the room was still silent, full of reflection. The glances they receive when they walk out are no longer suspicious or cold looks, but respect and appreciation. Everyone in the bank was silent, as if a great lesson in compassion and understanding had been taught to all. They begin to question themselves about how they have treated people they don't really understand, about how they judge only by appearances without ever getting into the real story of others. The banker, who had previously looked at Mr. John with impatient eyes, was now still standing, his hands on the counter, his eyes disjointed. She felt a profound change in her soul. The apology she just uttered was not only regret for her actions, but also an awakening. She knew that she could not continue to live in a world full of haste and prejudice. She clearly felt the importance of respecting every human being, whether rich or poor, strong or weak. Certainly, after today, she would never judge someone by their appearance or based only on superficial factors. She understands that everyone has their own story, and sometimes those stories are things worth listening to and feeling. The student, after helping Mr. John, went back to her work, but her mind still couldn't forget what had happened. She knew that she had done a good deed, but she also understood that she was not only helping Mr. John, but also helping herself to realize a deeper value in life. Kindness does not need to be ostentatious. There is no need to overestimate oneself. Just act sincerely, naturally, and without expecting anything. She knows that it is such small moments that really make a big change in life. As she looks back, she realizes that every small action can make a big difference, not only for herself but also for those around her. Certainly, today was a day that she would remember forever, not because of the help she had given, but because of the peace in her heart when she did the right thing. She knew that, in this world, Such good moments were precious. And if everyone can live with compassion, willing to help others without thinking about personal gain, then surely society will become much better. It doesn't stop there. The story of John, Alex, and the student continues to affect everyone present at the bank that day. Certainly, they will carry this lesson in their hearts, a lesson in patience, respect, and the value of acts of kindness. They will not forget the change they have witnessed, the change in the way they see others, and the way they understand the true value of human beings. For Mr. John, today is not only a day when he succeeds in withdrawing money for charity, but also a day when he feels the power of compassion, understanding, and respect from those around him. Although he is humble and does not want to show off the good things he does, today, he has received the right recognition from everyone, from a devoted son to a kind student, and also from those around him. That feeling made him feel happy, even if only for a moment, but it was a precious moment that he would never forget. For Alex, although he is a successful and wealthy person, what makes him most proud is his father's kindness and kindness. Alex understood that, no matter how successful he was, that success would be meaningless if it was not used to help others. Therefore, he always cherishes the values that his father passed down, the values that today are clearly expressed in the way Mr. John faces difficulties, and in the help of the young student. This story is not simply a situation that happened in a bank, but a lesson in compassion, respect, and mutual understanding. A lesson is that, in life, we should never judge someone by their appearance, but by their heart and actions. Because only by understanding the true value of human beings can we truly connect with each other and make the world a better place.